Let's welcome to the stage Michael Devins, who is the product manager, and Garrett Denny, who is the product marketing manager.
Thanks, Kat.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Kat. Good to see everyone. How was the morning? Were you in downstairs keynote, upstairs keynote? Yes, 50-50, downstairs. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, technical difficulties aside, I thought it was a great morning. We showed off a lot of products. That's always exciting. It's always fun for us. You can't control Wi-Fi, right? So I'll just kind of throw up my hands and leave that there. So we're going to talk through, speaking of product, a lot of products here today. And this is, of course, a look at the evolution of Jamf Pro. Now, we talk about the 10 series as this modern incarnation of Jamf Pro, right? So you think about the most recent version, the thing we are still iterating on today, it's of course the 10 series, but the roots go back a lot deeper. And so we'll talk about some things we've built this year, some things we are building heading into 2020, but also some things we have built in the past that really set the table for where the product is today, where it needs to go in the future. It's drastically different than it used to be. So as Kat said, this is Michael, I'm Garrett, and I'll just rock and roll. So I was just touching on this, but really 3 distinct chapters to the story of Jamf Pro. And if you've been around, maybe a quick poll of the room, how many of you have been around, raise your hand, more than 3 years? More than 5. That is really impressive. More than 7. More than a decade.
So maybe they should just give the presentation.
Yeah, seriously. That is super, super cool. First of all, thank you for being a part of the family for that long. That's really exciting for us to see from this side of the table. You'll recognize this intimately, right? When we started this company 17 and a half, almost 18 years ago, Chip and Zach around a table in Eau Claire, Zach was really looking out on a marketplace that looked radically different than it does today. And that's the Casper chapter of our history that you see here. Now, there was an inflection point, October 2016, where it went from Casper to Jamf Pro. I'm seeing some nodding heads, right? You were around, a thumbs up, awesome, that's good, where that was rebranded, right? The product went from Casper to the modern Jamf Pro incarnation. Now, Jamf Pro 10 series, if you didn't raise your hand there, no worries, you're among friends. Welcome as a more recent member of the family. It's not only the Jamf Pro story in the center, it's also the 10 series story. You can see that October 2017. Now, again, we debuted a ton of product this morning. Dean, Devins was on stage, I was on stage, our colleagues talking about Jamf Connect and Jamf Protect. It's a really exciting time to be a part of Jamf, and that includes everyone in this room and watching this recording, because we are at this point here, between teal and orange, the company's changing, and that's because the marketplace is changing, the problems we're trying to solve have been changing and are continuing to evolve, so we need to change the product to address that. So let's think about the roots of this. This isn't something we started in 2019, right? This really actually began in 2002, and Jeremy Butcher from Apple was a great session this morning, always a great speaker, right? We are very lucky, I think, to have Apple join us on our stage here. But you think back to 2002, the marketplace kind of looked like this. So we look out today, it's a radically different picture, but this is what Zach was looking at. And if you knew Zach, I mean, you know that guy, right? He's kind of sitting at a university, small one just across the border in Wisconsin. If you're from here, it's Eau Claire, University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. He's kind of looking around at their environment like, I think I can develop something to manage these better. I don't think the market's really addressed this, and I can probably hack it together, ship it, see if anybody wants to buy it, kind of go from there. And that's really where the product began. So 17 and a half years ago, that was the origin story of Jamf. Again, if you're newer, that might be news. But you know, a lot of things have changed. We've gone through Casper, Jamf Pro 10 series, into this portfolio mindset in 2020. Some things don't change. And Dean really encapsulates this well. It's that there is no step 3. And again, maybe some smiles in the audience because you've heard us say that a ton, right? It's been at every JNUC, it's in our marketing, it's on our webinars. That's very much a core organizing principle for us here at the company. We think about how we solve your problems, driving back to the simplicity of there is no step 3. Of course, that old Apple commercial, right? There is no step 3. We want to drive that home in Jamf. Now, this was actually a t-shirt. Did anybody have a copy of this t-shirt? Anyone raise their hand? That is so cool. This is what I love about JNUC, that you can ask 15 years ago, did you have that one random piece of swag and somebody's like, well, I had it and I still have it, and you're like, that's cool, okay, awesome. We'll look for it tomorrow. This was actually printed on a t-shirt. It's not just a cool design that demonstrates the transition from Casper into Jamf Pro. This is also a mindset organizationally, a shift that we've gone through as a company. So you think about the problem set that we were setting out to address with the Casper suite, right? We don't call it a suite anymore, but really that portfolio mindset is kind of bringing us back to that broader definition in the market. You think about what we tried to address back in 2002, it was empowering Mac admins, right? Mac admins love the Casper suite, and that was kind of the go-to-market plan for a long time. We built product to empower Mac admins in the marketplace. Pretty narrow definition there, right? Like, we know who we're selling to, we know the problem set, and we'll build product accordingly. Now, that's because in 2002, Jeremy alluded to this morning, this was the market, right? It was Mac. So you think back to when Zach looked around the marketplace and said, I think I can solve something here. This was his vision. And it's really important now in 2019 not to let all of the product evolution color the way that we look back on the history of Casper, because it was a very tailored view. One product, one solution, one person we're trying to empower. Now that, of course, grew very, very quickly. The iPhone was not just a successful product, it really changed the marketplace. And I think a lot of us as admins in the IT space, we felt iPhone more than we felt almost any other device. Mac, of course, is critical in enterprise and education, but you think about the pressure that iPhone put on our function in organizations, because it was grassroots. From that side of the table where people said, I already use this, I feel powerful on this device, I know it natively, you should support that. And that's not something we necessarily saw in 2002 when the company started with Mac. Very different conversation, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Then came iPad, of course, continued that tradition of broadening their impact into the mobile device space. It made Apple more mobile. It made Jamf more mobile. It made our mission more mobile. We needed to manage these devices in different ways. But again, think back to 2002. What did we talk about just a minute ago? Narrow definition. Mac. Empowering the Mac admin. Mac admins love Casper. Well, I'm looking at the screen and I see iPhone, I see iPad. I did not see that in that mission statement a minute ago, right? It wasn't iPhone admins love Casper, it was Mac. And so suddenly, the market's changing. Apple is driving a really positive change here, and we are adapting. So that's how the product started to change. Now, Apple TV, hot on the heels, that opened up a lot of doors in hospitality, in healthcare. You think of those use cases, even if you're outside that industry, that was a radical shift for us as a company and how we built roadmap. It was a radical shift for a lot of end users as well. So if that's you, you're looking at this like, yeah, we see that impact still today. And then, of course, Apple Watch. Now, this isn't an MDM piece, obviously, but Apple Watch, again, it's broadening the scope of who is being empowered. And so we think about this today in a lot of contexts, but healthcare, empowering people to have better data, more accessibility, more access and availability to those devices and those services, that's a piece of that as well. But I mentioned something a minute ago, and that was that conversation between IT and the end user. iPhone was that inflection point, right? And so Mac was this thing, maybe your company used it, maybe they just didn't. And there wasn't really remediation between those two states of being. It was kind of binary, right? Yes or no. And at the time, you really said yes most commonly if you're in a creative profession, right? It was kind of the go-to device of Madison Avenue in New York. Ad agencies, creatives around the world. If that was a yes, great, you had those devices. But if not, as we'll see here, I kind of want to illustrate this, that was a challenge. And it was a real barrier because the user would say, I want to work anywhere. You need to empower me to work anywhere. Well, IT might respond, the network is our security perimeter. We can't permit that. That's where we feel most comfortable kind of fencing this in and protecting our company, right? We're worried, there's risk. We need to protect corporate data and integrity. Well, but you empower me to do more, let me do more things, use the apps that I like. Well, that flexibility in a lot of ways was contrary to that IT admin perspective years ago. Lock it down, make sure this functions in the same way we've always thought it must function. Don't adapt, fit it to that pre-existing mold. That's challenging, right? It's challenging for admins because there's pressure on us. It's challenging for end users because, again, I'm comfortable with something outside the workplace and we're not adapting our roadmap to get there. I want to upgrade. Well, IT might respond, our software's not ready. And this is still a pain point today. I should see some nodding heads right now because OS upgrades, I see some smiles, some nodding heads. OS upgrades can be a bear, right? I mean, this is a big process for a lot of us, especially if you do this at scale. We just intuitively understand this at Jamf because we've been in the trenches with you. A lot of us have backgrounds in other industries, but we also spend a lot of time on site watching that OS upgrade campaign once or twice a year. That can really be tough, and you want it to be protected, consistent, secure. You also want, to this point, for your end users to feel empowered. How do we address that delta? We talked about that this morning in the keynote. We'll talk about it a bit more here today. And then finally, the big one, right? I want Apple at work. We're a shop that doesn't allow that, or we haven't bought that before. I don't know how to do that. We're not set up to support that kind of hardware. So the end user walks away feeling like IT's response was, you don't really need to be involved. I get that you're comfortable, you feel creative, you feel productive, but we don't want the corporation to go in that direction, right? And this is education, this is commercial, but we're just not quite there yet, right? The famous phrase, we're not quite there yet. Well, how do we get there? And how do we make sure that Jamf Pro is a piece of empowering people, end users, through IT? Dean talked about this in the keynote, that IT is changing. And if that's true, we're becoming a service organization in a different way. It's not just tickets anymore, right? It's empowering end users in conversations like this. That is a very different conversation. So you think back to 2002, there's a legacy there of IT admins. And we saw this on that slide. Who loves Casper? Mac admins love Casper, right? So that's the legacy. That was the marketplace. That was the focal point of our solution, the pain we were trying to solve. And so IT needs were primary and user needs kind of came in second, not in a derogatory way, but just kind of how it needed to be, right? We're trying to make things work here, keep this thing together, make sure the ship floats. End of the day, all of these requests coming in, we are not staffed, trained, and knowledgeable, supported even by Jamf to make that happen at scale. So again, how do we shift? Well, I think there's one reaction to this, which is we'll put users first. Users can be first, IT can be secondary, and we'll just primarily focus on the end user. We do want to empower them, absolutely. At the end user with the endpoint, that does need to be a focus. What ends up happening here is we don't emphasize, or we rather de-emphasize IT to a degree that it makes our jobs harder as IT admins. Everyone in this room, right? We're all wearing these lanyards today because we deal with this stuff day in and day out. And so there really needs to be an equilibrium between the user and IT. This might seem like something that should be kind of natively baked into any roadmap, but it's really tough. And so we're going to talk about some features and functionality here. Keep this in mind as we walk through this today. You're hearing about a specific feature, feature X, right? We've got a bunch of them that Devins and I will both talk about. Keep this in the back of your mind because the real core challenge for us at Jamf and for you in your chairs back at your organizations is this. You've got needs as a team or as an individual IT person. Your end users also have needs. They need to feel empowered. There are unique barriers for both of us. So again, a big change. Mac admins was the lineage, right? Mac admins love Casper. If we remade that t-shirt, that Swiss Army knife, that was really indicative of Apple and Jamf at the time, of kind of being the Swiss Army knife in enterprise and education. I think if we remade that graphic today, it would actually say something like Apple admins love Jamf broadly, right? Maybe Jamf Pro if it's specific, but with that portfolio mindset, we need to think about how we extend value in different ways. And sometimes that will be in Jamf Pro, a lot of times that will be in Jamf Pro going forward. You think about identity, you think about security. Those were two things we highlighted this morning. Great examples of extending that value alongside of the Jamf Pro product. So we've seen a lot here in the first couple of minutes. What I want to do is invite Michael Devins up to talk specifically about some product stuff, and we'll kind of kick this back and forth. But keep that lineage in mind. 17 plus years of balancing that transition in the marketplace, in your chair, and with end users from the Mac admin to the Apple admin. So, Michael.
Thanks, Garrett. It's interesting. So I lead a team of product managers for Jamf Pro, And we meet with a lot of customers, talk to a lot of customers, and even just in the last handful of years, to see the prominence, the attention paid to the user experience in a way that maybe wasn't traditionally the focus, as we sort of outlined here. It drives a different set of thinking for us. I know it does for you as well. Apple's, of course, pushing us all there as well, user-approved MDM and some of these changes to the system, all in service of user privacy and user empowerment. But it definitely forces a different sort of way of thinking on how we approach these problems and how these devices are about more than just get tech out there and more about create these innovative new workflows. How do these devices work together? How can we deploy them in new in different ways? And Pro, of course, is the fulcrum to that, and we've expanded around it. I want to talk about a handful of themes, product specific, kind of given the background there. And I'll group it into a few different themes just to kind of organize my thoughts. So first and foremost, one of our primary focus is making you powerful. Empowering you, of course, you're serving the user, and that maybe is the North Star, but how does a tool like Jamf Pro make you powerful? How do we preserve, protect, and deliver on that Apple experience? Apple often has a reputation of being a consumer company. And while the experience they deliver is a very consumer-oriented experience, that doesn't have to stop at the front door of work. And how can we protect that experience at work in the same way that they expect it at home? Of course, the definition of this has changed over time, over the last 17 years. What it means to enterprise, education, small, medium, large changes. We're seeing even more just with the announcements this morning around Protect. But security is more prominent than ever as a consideration. And then not just the devices themselves better together, also Jamf and the Jamf products, sort of harking back to this notion of the suite of tools in a different way, these tools serving the end users as much as IT, but how do those jive together is really a strong consideration. So let's take that first one. There are a couple of things that we shipped recently or we're working on. One we saw this morning relates to Google, the other to Apple School Manager, kind of touching on a couple different use cases. So earlier this year, we had a blog post and we had some support for Google that allowed someone that runs their own server infrastructure to configure Google LDAP. A number of organizations, both enterprise and education, use Google. But what you've seen in recent, upcoming, I lose track of the versions, now or soon, Google Secure LDAP as a part of the cloud identity providers here in Jamf Pro, so a new capability to just natively configure support. If Google is your directory service, if that's the credential that you want to give your users as the single way to sign on and get access to all of your resources. Google can now be a cloud identity provider built in here. And so this is really powerful because every different organization has different infrastructure, different considerations. And so how do we sort of move to encompass more of those? But Google's a big step forward for a lot of customers, especially in the education space. And then specifically in education, we're unlocking a ton of capabilities with all of the rich information that we get. We're seeing great adoption of Apple School Manager. Of course, Apple's driving customers there. And even if you're not using every feature and facet of shared iPad, et cetera, the rich metadata that you get from Apple School Manager through that roster API gives you some really powerful ways of responding to that app request by scoping to Michael's third grade class and literally using that criteria to build out a smart group, right? So just some great capabilities. Data that was in there but not really usable, and exposing that to make you more powerful and more efficient. Try and streamline some of those workflows. Another area that we're working on, and there's a bit of backstory to this as well, but API integrations. Jamf and is a common phrase you've heard over the years. We exist in a more complex ecosystem than pure Apple, right? There's just any number of layers of integrations that that Jamf Pro needs to support and play nice with others, right? And so we have our traditional, our legacy customer API, and you maybe have seen that we've been working on our new Jamf Pro API, which beyond moving past basic auth, some new capabilities, and also some new coverage that hasn't existed before. So one thing that is really exciting that happened this year, a ton of feature requests on Jamf Nation for this. Let me scope pre-stages, build pre-stages via the API, et cetera. The Jamf Pro API actually was a result of some modularization efforts that are going on in Jamf Pro, and so as we rewrite areas of the product, we're able to bring API endpoints and capabilities that didn't even exist before. And so this is a great example of being able to make you powerful, especially when we're talking about managing hundreds or thousands of devices and scoping those programmatically. So that's a big win for the Jamf Pro API. And of course, big numbers can be really big when you're someone like IBM, but how do we make people powerful? Not to do more with less, but to do more with the same, to be more capable, being able to focus on the next set of experiences you can create as compared to checking boxes in Jamf Pro, right? Then we get into the Apple experience. I'll actually let Garrett talk a little bit about this, but all of the work you do is in service of this, right? People choose Apple for a reason. So Garrett's going to give us a little recap on some of the elements to consider here.
Yeah, if you've been around for 5, 7, 10 years, you raised your hand a few minutes ago, some of this will be review, some of it I want to kind of recontextualize. Things like De0 Support. First of all, if you've been around anywhere near a decade, you've heard this message ever since we nailed De0 8+ years ago. So that's been a big part of our history, right? As a product organization, this is important to us because it's important to you. So we hear a couple of different use cases here. Number one, end users get excited, right? And so you go home, you're again trying to empower the end user. What do you hear when Apple is hyping up a new operating system? It's, I want to use that. That new feature, that new piece of functionality is really exciting. Give me that power. And again, this is less an ask for a specific piece of code or a feature. It's an ask to be empowered in their day-to-day lives. And so you watch that keynote, it's really cool. We get excited about that because we all work with this technology, but end users do too. And they see this stuff on the nightly news, they see it on the internet when they're kind of browsing after those big keynotes with Tim Cook and company, because it's a really big deal that impacts a lot of our end users. And so contextualizing De0 Support in that light makes speed important, right? We want velocity after Apple releases a new feature. There's really a second way to view this as well, and it's empowering you as IT admins. We hear from a lot of companies with different needs. Specifically, I was talking to one that's a massive global media production company. They were saying, look, we don't really need to rush these things out. Our end users, they're employees, so we'll get them the latest version of, in this case, it was iOS, when we can get it to them. The important thing, though, is that we have a suite of tools that allows us to make blockbuster movies and TV shows. And if we push something before validating every single one of those tools, that's a really bad day. It's not a bad day because we lose man hours, we have to stay late, reset stuff. We don't hit TV deadlines. We don't hit movie deadlines, right? Really, really big impact. And so you might not work in the media space, but that definitely should resonate with all of us. We've all been there. Your back's against the wall. We need to hit a deadline. 2 different ways you can look at De0 Support. And so what I'd end on with this slide is just by saying, if you're brand new to Jamf and you've been here once, maybe your first time, twice, 3 times, this is a commitment that we've had for almost a decade now and will continue to have going forward because we've seen that end user impact. Ultimately, that end user empowerment that comes from De0 Support. It's exciting to look at a graph like this. I think it's cool as a delivery organization to say, like, we're hitting these deadlines, but the bigger message, of course, is always end users. What do people care about? How do we make them feel powerful? And that's a Jamf statement, we. That's an us statement as Jamf Nation, we as well. So one thing we showed off this morning was App Request, this new workflow that we debuted initially as Teacher App Request as part of our doubling down on education in 2019. This has been a massive theme for us. If you're in the room and you're part of EDU, you might have heard this message already, but a really significant change for teachers that, again, want to be productive faster. Now, this is not just impactful for education. This is commercial as well, and you can think about use cases where specific teams, different offices, geographies, time zones, people around the world, they'll identify a need. And it doesn't always flow nice and planned as you would expect of 3 months out or end of 2019, we're thinking ahead to 2020, here's the app my team might need to power 2020's productivity or revenue attainment. Sometimes things just pop up. And sometimes you adopt a new piece of tech, you find a new customer you really want to win, you're supporting a new team in a new location, and something bubbles to the surface. And at that point, you've got pain. You really have 2 choices to solve that pain. One path is we're going to do the kind of old school, like submit it via paper, maybe it's via email, try to track this thing through that provisioning process manually. We wanted to streamline that, and App Request gets us much, much closer to that idealized vision of what this could look like. So I want to show what this could look like, specifically looking at an iPad here. You can see an App Request workflow in real time. I'll just kind of click through. It's very easy inside of self-service to click search, like you saw Jen do this morning on that keynote stage, or at least attempt to, right? Wi-Fi willing. Search for an app. We're again pulling up GeoGebra. They're a great partner of Jamf, and they're powering a lot of interesting learning around the world, and provision it, or at least request for it to be provisioned right here. How many licenses do you need? Who is this for? Which class? What building? Why? Give me some context. Will you need it all year? You can customize this form to your heart's content, make it very, very fast, 1 or 2 lines, make it a little more built out with, I think, up to 5 or 6 responses at this point. It's a great way to, again, gather the data natively inside of this process that you need. So think of empowerment in 2 lights. IT being empowered with better data, cleaner data sets coming directly to you, and the end user, again, being empowered because they need something. They need to solve that pain. We can solve it a lot faster. For that teacher specifically, getting them back to teaching and powering their classroom faster than they were before. Big change for us. I also want to give a quick shout out here and show a couple of screenshots of accessibility. So self-service on the left, of course, if you're brand new, that's Jamf self-service. This is a major deal for us in the Jamf Nation. It's a way that you can kind of have tier 0 triaging, if you will, for your end users. Empower them with apps, documents, links to the web, anything you think they might need to really kind of take care of their day-to-day. You can empower them natively in self-service. That's part of Jamf Pro. It's a great tool if you don't use it today. But coupled with this idea of accessibility, which Apple has really brought to the forefront this year in a big way, and they've said accessibility is meaningful to us, not only kind of on a global sense of we as a company care about this, on a product sense. We need to broaden that scope, that kind of possible cross-section of the planet that has the ability to be empowered with our software, with our tools, and for Apple, with their hardware as well. Man, that is so meaningful. And so you hear mission statements at Jamf like empowering people with Apple, helping people succeed with Apple. This is how we tactically get there. You think about people that couldn't use something like self-service before. Well, with VoiceOver and voice control, today they can. And this is a major change. If you work in education, you can think of the applications. Students that really need a new tool and a new workflow to interact with that computer, interact with something like self-service to grab a document, grab an application. And in the enterprise, this is massive. We have a global workforce a lot of times, right? In commercial, it could be small, could be growing, could be large. A diverse and global workforce that could be geographically, that could be a lot of different things. You want to empower people and meet them where you're at with your software. That's just deeply meaningful to us here at Jamf, so we're really proud of this. I'm actually proud to be showing this here today because Andrina and her team, they have done a fantastic job really driving this through the product development pipeline, so hats off to them. You can see it here on a Mac, and here again on iOS. I want to call out those small little numbers. Those should not look familiar if you don't use this, right? That's net new. And you can just talk to that device and say, click on that region. That specific element is labeled with 1, 2, 3, 4. Follow those numbers, and it gives you that ability to interact with a device you couldn't normally interact with. That is massive, and that changes the game for people tactically day to day. So again, really proud of that. These next 2 slides I'll keep brief because we did talk about this in Keynote, but I want to re-emphasize enrollment customization. Definitely try this out. If you haven't tried this out yet, it's been around for a couple of releases since I think 10.15. I'm with Devins. All of our release versions can be a blur when you're looking into 2020, but I believe 10.15 this launched. We've iterated since then with 10.16 and very soon 10.17 as well. This is a great way for you to put your personal stamp as a team on setup. Think about welcome messages. That's a great way to make somebody feel like they're a part of your corporate culture or a part of that school or district, right? It's a great way to say to a student, welcome. Maybe you moved from a different place. Maybe it's your first time stepping up into middle school. That's a great way to kind of take them by the hand and lead them through this new device experience. Very powerful use cases here. The second thing I want to touch on, though, is user enrollment. And again, this launched in 10.15. Was really talked about and debuted at Apple's WWDC back in June. So we supported it on day 0, have continued to iterate. And again, You will see more of this in 10.17 coming in the very near future. So keep your eyes out on what's going on with user enrollment. That's in preview currently, but we want that to be something that we take out of preview and make it ready for prime time. Ready at scale, ready with production devices. Keep your eye on that, again, in the very near future. But I want to call out just a few things on the slide here. We talk about kind of the old way of doing BYOD. Personal device management was the way that we labeled this within Jamf. Apple is transitioning and evolving that definition. BYOD is really becoming BYOD 2.0 or 3.0, whatever era you want to peg that as. It's growing and it's evolving. And the way that, again, we can empower users that have a device and they want to bring that into the workplace or bring that into a school is definitely changing. When you think about 10 years ago or even back to 2002, the number of people that showed up like lugging a Mac, like I bought this thing or I got it for Christmas, I want to bring it into the organization. You were like, well, all right, that's kind of unique. Maybe we can make that happen. Today, it is a supported and scalable workflow, and this gets you there. So when somebody says, maybe we don't have iPads available in our school, in our office, you can say, that's all right. You've got one at home. We want to make that secure when you bring that in, protect our corporate data and infrastructure, and keep you safe with privacy as well. It's kind of that balance we always do, security and privacy. User enrollment takes a big step forward into the future for both. It's got a partition on the device. You can look into that more in technical documentation, but I'll just leave it to say that the user has better privacy than they ever have been in the past or ever have in the past, and the company can rest assured that when those devices, thinking about that perimeter that we talked about a minute ago, when they come into that secure perimeter of that corporation, of that school, it's easier than ever to track those devices, manage those devices to a degree, but also make sure that that user is happy and empowered. Quick shout out at the bottom here as well. Self-service is coming to user enrollment in 10.17. I am going to put a release note version on that specific piece. So again, if you're kind of connecting the dots here, watch 10.17, lots coming for user enrollment. It's an exciting time to have BYOD in your org. So I'll wrap up this session with this quote from last year. And again, if you raised your hand that you've been around for a few years, you might have joined us at JNUC last year, and you might have seen Ricard from Skyscanner. It was a great session. You can find the recording on our website. But I just want to read a piece of this quote. His kind of core pain point was, we've got a lot of Macs coming into our organization suddenly. A mass influx is what Ricard said of Macs. So you're thinking about this as the IT admin, what do I do? Well, it got to a point where IT was really struggling to keep up with the tools that we had at the time, right? So after implementing Jamf, we now spend more time providing new features. And critically, this is the kind of money part of this quote for me, because again, we are empowering end users, improving the user experience than we do managing 850 plus Macs. Some of you might be there today. That might be reality. Some of you might have a bit of a delta where you're saying, we're still struggling to scale and keep up. This is definitely a success story we can look to. I want you to look at jamf.com for that story. Talk to us after, but Ricard is a great example of how you can scale, again, to more than 850 Macs, but spend less and less time managing them so you can focus on that end user experience. So Devins, with that, let's maybe transition out of UX and into security.
Yeah, actually, I want to take an opportunity to, before I dive into security, to just make a couple of the comments on the best Apple experience. And we're generally talking about your users, right? So self-service, being accessible to people of all abilities, and leveraging the latest great Apple technologies. And I don't want to diminish that. I also do want to speak to this audience for a moment and some of the things we're doing to serve you in your day-to-day. This morning in a keynote, I showed an element of a broader effort, which is moving to more modern web technologies, Angular, but the different kinds of experiences we can create. And that extends to the broader navigation of Jamf Pro and efforts around improving breadcrumbs and other things that make Jamf Pro more usable and more accessible. But there's a number of things going on there to really understand how you're using our product. For those of you that maybe are familiar with Jamf Engage, launched last year, a number of wins, but one of them, you don't realize how much it helps us help you, perhaps, and I just want to share that not only does Jamf Engage give you the ability to get a notification of a new feature, which, maybe you missed something in release notes, maybe it's just a lot to keep up with, and so we can surface that right in product, and for many, that's a win. But I want to point out, too, that Jamf Engage gives us some visibility into how you're using our product, not not what you're putting in, not what your Wi-Fi password is or anything of content, but how you're navigating our product. A fun little example, shout out to our UX team. I was talking to our UX leader, Andrina, and she had this thesis. She said, I wonder how many people click these things in Pro thinking they're buttons that do something. And today, there's a lot of things that look like buttons that aren't. And then she was referencing the managed device count, the unmanaged device count, and so we actually use Jamf Engage. It's a tool we can use to understand how you're navigating our product, and we actually tagged that text that isn't a button and started counting how many people were clicking it. Actually, it turns out a lot of admins click that button to say, show me my presumably managed computers or unmanaged computers. And from that, we were even able to pop up a survey saying, you tried to click this button. It didn't actually go anywhere, but what would you expect it to do? How could we make the product accommodate more of the way you think about this product? How would you expect it to work? Insights that we just couldn't reasonably gather, especially for someone trying to complete a task. And it's an example of how we're trying to be more in tune with how you want to and expect to use our products, because there's a lot we can do to serve your day-to-day interaction with Jamf Pro beyond just the core Apple technologies that your users interact with. So I just wanted to point that out as well. A number of things that we're trying to do to make your lives a little bit easier. Of course, security. We'll get back on script here. It's not an optional thing, right? There's a number of things you need to do to make sure that your environment is secure. Over the last couple years, you've seen a broadening of our certificate authority integrations. Certificates are better than passwords, even if no passwords are better than passwords. Security often is the underpinning of those experiences. And so we've continued to build out some both new certificate authority options. Again, it's like an identity provider. Not everyone uses all the same, and so we need to kind of continue to broaden the reach for who we can serve. But we did some work around semantic DigiCert, and we also built out some additional workflows to automate some of the workflows around automatic renewal and also revocation. So if an employee leaves, how do we automate the revocation of that certificate? Or if someone's in a penalty box because they did something, how can we make sure that their access is revoked? Not the same thing as protect, but just more about being able to manage certificates as the key to the content, and then also being able to revocate those certificates. And you'll continue to see over the next year building out a number of new certificate authority integration options, again, trying to accommodate more of those environments as you're leveraging and relying upon certificates more and more. So the Jamf management framework, there's this interesting relationship between pure MDM, pure management framework, and of course they meet in the middle, and Jamf Pro is made all the more powerful because of the management framework, right? So it's both massively important that we keep up with all the new capabilities that Apple is coming out with, implement this new config profile, implement this new MDM command. Where should that MDM command live? I want to automate it in these different ways. The management framework really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to execute and manage those settings. So we've been doing a lot of work to upgrade some of our core technologies, for instance, moving from inter-process communication to cross-process communication to harden those communications with the management framework and the binary to make sure that it is as secure as it can be, as secure as it needs to be, and migrate away from some of these older technologies that to a place where we can feel much more comfortable and confident in going forward. With bringing the Digita crew into the fold, we've actually begun integrating some of the Objective-C tools into the management framework, which is pretty cool. So you'll see more of that going forward. Some of the stuff that Patrick and Josh are working on, our teams have been able to share some of those learnings internally, not to combine to a singular product, but to be able to share some of those awesome new technologies into the management framework as well, so they can work better together. And more granular controls around extension attributes collection, disabling those. I like to put up this slide around single sign-on. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. Just two examples here. It either means every time I sign in with the same credentials. This is federated, right? And I mean, that's great. That's much better than a bunch of usernames and a bunch of passwords, or the same username with different passwords, which is even more confusing. There is this pie in the sky vision, though, of how do you just sign in a single time? And we're starting to see signs from what Apple's allowing on the platform and what the entire ecosystem is moving towards to give a more realistic view on what that option number 2 looks like. One of those things, or some of those elements, launched this fall with iOS 13, iPadOS, and macOS Catalina. For those of you that aren't familiar, I'm talking about single sign-on extensions. And so there are a few different components here, but the primary three are apps can now act as single sign-on extensions on Mac OS and iOS, being able to redirect or intercept and essentially handle more of those authentication steps without a user needing to do another Okta login or another Azure login. So they can do some more of that on-device single sign-on experience for the user, minimizing sign-in fatigue, which is pretty cool. Of course, that needs to be managed and enabled via MDM. So if something like Jamf connected to the first bullet, Jamf Pro would need to be prepared to deploy those configuration profiles. There are a couple others associated domains that might be coming into play as well. But that MDM component is important. And of course, you need an identity provider that supports that. And just to kind of give you a visual of the vision here, if we start with enrollment customization, these are sort of a mock-up of the workflow, right? So we start with a modern identity provider, maybe with multi-factor. So cloud identity provider securing our automated device enrollment. Maybe some additional steps to that enrollment customization, that rich onboarding experience. Of course, the device comes under management, and Jamf Pro might push down a single sign-on payload. It might push down Jamf Connect. Maybe Jamf Connect could act as that single sign-on app extension and play nice as identity providers come on board to support these new technologies to really create a seamless single sign-on experience for users. Now, Jamf controls 2 of those 3 bits. So we've got the Jamf Pro support, we've got the Jamf Connect support, and as we see identity providers ramp up on the new technologies as well, it's going to be really exciting to hopefully streamline and simplify those user experiences even as we do what we can within Pro. So definitely early days for the tech, but those single sign-on extensions we believe are going to be very powerful. And of course, Microsoft, so many people use Microsoft. It's just such an important thing for us to create a great experience around. Something you'll see launching soon is a better streamlined experience around setting up your Intune integration. Intune integration is possible today. There's a lot we can do to make it better. And the first bullet connects to the last, which is Microsoft, like they partnered with Jamf a couple years ago now to be the sole partner in delivering an extended Intune experience on the Mac with Intune conditional access. They're extending some similar APIs for mobile devices, for iPhone, iPad, called device compliance. So not quite the same language they're using. It's not conditional access. It's Microsoft Intune device compliance. But that cloud connector not only streamlines your macOS Intune integration with a much easier setup, but also lays the foundational integration for the upcoming Microsoft Intune device compliance. Similar capabilities to the macOS Intune integration. Another thing we learned after putting Intune into customer environments is no 2 customer environments are alike. There's a lot of different steps, a lot of different permutations of how customers want to order those steps. I want users to do this, not that. And so we've done a lot to not have a base assumption of here's the happy path, and better accommodate different orders of operations, different environmental factors, which MAC address should be the Wi-Fi MAC address, all sorts of things, dongle gate, right? All sorts of things that can really affect and limit someone's access if not configured properly. We want to reduce friction and increase adoption, all to make a better user experience, and that includes reducing the number of sign-ins where we can on device. And the last thing is the one that I showed this morning relating to Office 365 management. So, it's an interesting trend when we look at how you traditionally deploy Office. You download, maybe configure, repackage, upload, deploy. There's a lot of overhead to that workflow. Patch management as well, and then of course, scripting for your settings. Wouldn't it be great if you could just rely on the Mac App Store and config profiles? And though it's maybe not something that everyone is doing today, there's a real promising feature that just takes so much of that overhead out of packaging and deploying and scripting for settings and says, deploy some volume licensed apps, manage some config profiles natively within Jamf Pro, and again, because that JSON that renders all those Office settings lives outside of the Jamf Pro code base with the new application and custom settings payload, you're always going to have the latest settings from Microsoft within Jamf Pro, even if you're not taking a Jamf Pro upgrade. So it just, again, gives you a lot of flexibility, especially when you're trying to adopt some of these more modern workflows, especially those depending upon App Store distribution with Office and settings management. Of course, we've had Brad at JNUC in the past, And our goal is to really deliver the best experience, and that includes the very real element of making sure we're playing nice and making the most of those Apple and Microsoft integration points within our customer environments. And really that's sort of one version of a theme, Jamf and Microsoft better together, that extends, or rather we'll take a different view of as we talk about how Jamf Pro, as we said up front, isn't the only piece of tech in your stack, but how does Pro serve as the platform for both these third-party integrations as well as serving up the new capabilities as our portfolio expands. And so Garrett's going to give us a little bit more information around some of the things happening in the better together space.
Yeah, you know what I really love about that Brad slide, or about Brad in general, he's a great person, is thinking back to 2002 again. Can you imagine in 2002 when this company was formed, thinking, well, a little bit down the road, we're going to have Microsoft on stage talking about a better together story. And it's not because it was like a good, bad thing, right? This was not a pushback against them thing. This was a market problem that we're trying to solve for what? Mac admins, right? And so the whole story of this evolution of Jamf Pro goes back to that market problem in 2002. And then you layer on iPhone, iPad, all of the other devices, services, and support that we've had to layer on since then. And suddenly that better together story makes a ton of sense. Devin's just talked about this, but a lot of people use Microsoft products, use Office products. And so when you think about an IT admin exists to empower our end users, that doesn't stop with Mac, with iPhone, with iPad, right? It really extends beyond that to things like the Office suite. And so Brad has just been a great example of that, but I want to talk about better together for a minute here. So Jamf Connect, we have been talking about this for about a year since Joel and company joined Jamf. Really exciting change for us as an organization. So not only do we have the expertise of somebody like Joel, and you saw him on stage this morning demoing something that I really think is a market mover. That was some really significant tech. So if you've worked with identity, with authentication in the past, and you saw that passwordless demo, boy, that could really change a lot of our day-to-day lives. That's significant stuff. Joel is a brilliant person. He's driving some great change in the market, but also here at Jamf, because we're thinking about this not in the light of what more can we add onto Jamf Pro and change with that core product. It's a question of what's changing in the market, and what do we need to change as a portfolio to make sure that we, A, support that, and then B, empower end users, right? I'm just going to keep saying that over and over. So a few things here from Jamf Connect, managing settings natively and passing user information during enrollment. These are two pain points again. We've talked about different paths that kind of come off of pain points earlier in this talk. As admins, we often have a choice, and sometimes we really only have one choice because we're kind of hamstrung by existing process or infrastructure, right? And as we evolve, we sometimes get to open, rarely we get this opportunity to open another path that does it better. We really want Jamf Connect to be that second path, to take identity alongside of something like Jamf Pro. I almost said Jamf Protect. We're also excited about Protect. Alongside of Jamf Pro, maybe alongside of Protect as well, but specifically to address that pain point of identity and account creation. So that's where it started. Today you saw the evolution into passwordless authentication, which is a massive change for that product. Really excited to see that come later this year and into 2020 and beyond, to see that evolution continue. But again, we think about this, again, from that higher level mindset of what does this look like from my seat and from the seat of our end users? Well, let's walk through that. From the Jamf Pro perspective, you can see natively inside of the Pro product, we've got Jamf Connect login as a configuration profile. So I'm editing within this brand new menu, and my eyes, I've got 2 kids. Apparently my eyes are failing me. It's application and custom settings. I'll just blame my children like a good dad. But that's actually a net new menu that you will see coming very soon in the product. So again, it used to be, I think, just custom settings. It's now application and custom settings. Small change. Important distinction because, again, we're talking about a new application integration with Jamf Connect. We want to extend our value into identity and account management and creation and extend that Jamf Connect value into Jamf Pro. It does need to go both directions. So what does it look like when we're configuring this? Again, Devin's mentioned this a second ago. I've got Azure AD, not a pure cloud play, but Azure AD is our example here. We're kind of dealing with a simple toggle here, and that's my favorite part about this, as somebody that just wants to get back to doing other things. For you, that might be tickets, it might be onboarding new employees, it might be powering students on their first day of school like we showed this morning. I think the more we can make our functionality integrate in this manner, the better. Pro plus Connect, toggle on, toggle off. Get back to your day. It's that fast, it's that easy, and we begin sharing information. Now, we talk about extension, and there's really kind of another, I don't want to use the word persona, but another type of person we can empower here beyond IT and beyond a generic end user in your org, and that is parents and that is teachers. So we've talked a lot about teachers. Parents is brand new. That's never really been on our stage before, but 2 applications coming to Jamf Pro that are just really exciting because, again, we're empowering a different kind of person. So, Devins, with that, turn it over to you.
Yeah, so you kind of see some of the trajectory in broadening who it is that we're serving, from the core Mac admin to all the different Apple workflows that honestly, as we follow Apple every 0 day, there's new stuff, and all of a sudden we're managing iPads, and all of a sudden we're managing Apple TVs, and now we're pushing into a non-IT crowd, getting in front of teachers and in front of parents. Getting to a place where customers aren't so focused on, we use Jamf Pro, we use Jamf now. Really, Jamf is perhaps a collection, harkening back to the suite that was Casper Suite, but really it's about Jamf solving these problems for your organization, all trying to deliver on that user experience. A quote from Martin Lang at SAP. And just to give you a visual to kind of close this out, Pro, of course, is, call it the platform that we deliver most of these integrations and capabilities through, but expanding to a very simplified MDM need on the left with Jamf Now, education focus with school, of course, the identity layer and the security layer, just gives you a really strong visualization of how these pieces fit together. That's not to say every organization needs all of these pieces, but we're trying to be really thoughtful about how we solve problems in the broader space for the broader set of users by helping those using Jamf and thinking of that more collectively. So we're a few minutes over, so we're going to linger for time for questions, but I do want to say thank you for those that want to head off to the next section, grab a coffee or otherwise. Really appreciate you spending your afternoon with us, and have a great JNUC. So we'll linger if anyone wants to take a mic. Otherwise, we'll pop down off the stage in a couple minutes, and you can ask us, not via microphone if you'd prefer. But yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick question with Jamf Parent.
Yeah.
I work in a school district, and kind of a no-starter for us was that it's all based on the Apple mobile device platform. We wonder what our parents would, with Android devices or don't have access to an Apple device, would do with Jamf Parent. Are you looking to expand to other platforms?
Yeah, the Jamf School product offers a web version of some of their products. Jamf Pro supports solely the app integration, so the iOS app, and no plans to bring that to other app stores. But the Jamf School product does have some interesting capabilities around web-based interactions, not an app-based interaction. Don't have anything specific to say around when that sort of capability might come to Pro, but that'd be another way to try and address the cross-platform needs of the parent population that might not necessarily have an iOS device.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, what do you got?
It was mentioned at the keynote that the Microsoft Office configuration profile web management interface was provisioned through a piece of custom JSON. Is that going to be documented or opened up publicly, basically to allow you to implement configuration profile templates, particularly if you have an eye towards multiple administrators on the
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we've implemented today is Jamf hosting the files for Connect and for Office. I'll tell you that there's been some discovery around how we might open that up and how we might allow you to roll your own, as it were. Nothing to share as far as specifics or timelines, but definitely something we're thinking about, and I'd love to chat more about what use cases you've got after the fact.
Okay.
The technology is possible, it's just a matter of how far we want to take it in that direction, but super interesting space.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool, I think that's it. We'll forfeit the mics. They're taking away our tables, but we'll loiter here if you have more questions. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.